Okay, those who care to, call the meeting to order. Those who care to, please stand for an opening prayer and pledge of allegiance. Mr. Cameron, if you would, please.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day and just thank you for all you do for us. And Lord, we just pray that you would guide and direct us as we lead and navigate this city, and just give us wisdom and direction in all we do, all we say tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get started tonight, we have a promotion in the fire department. Chief Compton, if you would, please.
Yes, firefighter Jeff King recently was promoted to engineer. For some of you who've been on the city council a while, Mr. Shears, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Poole, Jeff started with us about 2007. He was one of the 9 people that was hired on the Safer branch, so you probably remember him. He left me about 2013, went into business for himself, and then he's also a certified CPA. He didn't really like the CPA part of it. Firefighting's a whole lot more fun. Sorry, Megan. So he come back a couple of years, actually it's 2 years ago this month, and recently took the promotion test. He was the top candidate for the job, and I'm really pleased to have him back. What's that? Jeff, step right up.
You come over. Take a picture with your helmet.
Great.
Congratulations. We're happy to have you back. The CPA stuff is for the birds, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jeff, this is Landon, right? Yep. So your son Landon is gonna pin you, and you went over kind of how to do this out there so he didn't stab you, right?
Yep.
Landon, you feel good about it? There's the badge. Sure.
If he does, you know paramedics.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, can we wait, come on out? We'll help. All right, congratulations. All right, moving on to citizen participation. Anyone who would like to speak to anything not on the agenda, please step to the podium, state your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes. I don't know if we've got a bunch of firemen that are going to speak, or if they're all anyone wishing to speak to anything not on the agenda. Seeing none, citizen participation is closed. Moving on to the consent agenda. Any motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda?
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? You had to do that to me. That motion carries 6-0 with 2 abstentions. Boards, Commission, Committee schedules. Of note, City Council meeting. The next one will be June 18th, 2019, followed by July 9th, 2019. Also be a Planning and Zoning meeting June 10th, 2019. On to old business tabled items. Need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill number 19-07.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Laura.
Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri approving the final plat of the Monte Cristo Phase 6 subdivision.
Thank you. Now I need a motion and a second for final approval of final passage of Bill number 19-07.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Haynes, we did have some people absent, including myself last time, so if you wouldn't mind giving us a brief overview, please.
Absolutely. Phase 6 of the Monte Cristo subdivision consists of 4.19 acres. The final plat legally subdivides the land into 20 residential lots and includes the dedication of right-of-way, utility, and stormwater easements. Staff has reviewed the final plat and determined it to be in substantial conformance to the requirements of the preliminary plat and also the city's subdivision and final platting ordinance. A be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions, comments, or concerns from council? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Councilmember Wilson,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Self,
Aye.
Councilmember Bashirs,
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin,
Aye.
Councilmember Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Dykeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Ms. Haynes. Moving on to new business, I need a motion and a second for the first reading of bill number 19-08.
Motion.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Laura.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending the municipal code of the City of Republic, Missouri by creating Chapter 525, a small wireless facility development.
Thank you. Mr. Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Late last year, the Missouri Legislature adopted the Uniform Small Wireless Facility Development Act. That act set forth the standards that local governments in Missouri must follow when dealing with future small cell wireless facilities. This act requires that local governments adopt an ordinance that covers small cell deployment once a request is made from a small cell wireless company. We have been working for probably a couple years now on small cell in the city, but it wasn't until recently, after this act was passed, that the telcos such as Verizon and AT&T started moving forward with their projects in the city. Currently, Verizon and AT&T are planning to deploy small cell in Republic. Brief history of what small cell is, because I know there's some questions about what exactly is small cell. Small cell wireless is, as the name suggests, smaller versions of the macro cell phone towers that people are used to seeing. The small cell wireless facilities are usually contained on a pole similar to an electricity pole or a telephone pole. Also, some are attached directly to the same electricity or telephone poles. The antennas are usually at the top of the pole with other attachments as needed, again, usually attached to the pole itself. Small cell towers in themselves are very low-powered cellular towers, and in the future, they'll use different frequencies and bands that will facilitate the deployment of 5G. Because of their low power and frequencies, they are required to be deployed in greater numbers than the usual large macro towers that we're used to. The range is usually at most a few hundred feet. Therefore, because of all these factors, the city will likely see a large number of small cell towers eventually within inside the city. What this ordinance does is, as I discussed before, we're mandated to pass this. The state legislature, like I talked about, passed the act last year that requires us to act on this. So this ordinance is mandated upon us by the state of Missouri. This ordinance, as it is required under state law, allows small cell providers to use our right-of-way to deploy small cell wireless facilities. This will take the form of, as I discussed before, antennas and related equipment on either new utility poles or on existing electricity poles. They are allowed, without going through any zoning review or approval, to co-locate and install small cell wireless facilities in the right-of-ways in all areas except single-family, residentially zoned, or historic areas on or before August 28th of 2018. The city is not allowed to charge any fees or rates other than those allowed under statute, and those are applications fees that range from $100 to $500, and if they co-locate on a city pole, we can charge up to $150 per year per pole. And although the state law limits a lot of what the city would normally be allowed to do under its zoning, land use, and police powers, the staff has added provisions to the extent that we're allowed to protect the city and our citizens. Some of the provisions that we've added include reserving certain rights and authorities, as I've outlined in section 525.080, adding a provision that requires a small cell provider to relocate at their own expense their equipment if the city needs the right-of-way for any further use, such as widening the roads, managing water or sewer lines, or dealing with drainage issues. Requiring the utility poles and related equipment to be in good condition, free of graffiti, and no lighting or commercial signage allowed. Defining a minimum required application process with the ability for the Public Works Director to add more requirements. Define some concealment and safety requirements to the extent that we're allowed to under state law. Defined an abandonment and removal process for small cell facilities, and added an expiration clause in the ordinance since the state act has an expiration date of January 1st, 2021. I will add that yesterday, after our ordinance was already published the week before, we did receive some feedback from AT&T and Verizon with some suggested changes. Staff is reviewing those further changes, and there is a very good likelihood that you will see some amendments before the second read. Once those are proposed, I'll provide those as soon as possible to the council members. I don't anticipate any dramatic changes, but I do anticipate some proposed changes because of their comments. Verizon has also offered to send a representative to the city if anybody would like any further information on this as far as the fundamentals of small cell, but not on the legal issues of this ordinance. If there's any questions?
Questions, comments, or concerns from the council?
So the state is saying, here's what, basically encompassing this, we can't make it more restricted than that.
That's correct. We're confined by what the state law allows us to do. And in this instance, kind of what you're going to be seeing later this summer when we're dealing with medical marijuana, they're very specific on the requirements. When they're very specific, we cannot go above and beyond those requirements, and we cannot be in conflict with those requirements either.
But we could be more lax in
Yes.
certain stuff.
Yes, we could be more lax.
Anything else, council? Okay. Remember, this is the first read. If you have any questions between now and the next meeting, please get with Mr. Ison. All right, moving on to resolutions. Resolution number 19-R-20-A. I'm sorry, that dash shouldn't be in there. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Midwest Public Risk for property and liability insurance for fiscal year 2019-2020. Need a motion and a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Payne.
Good evening. It's that time of year again for our property liability insurance renewal. Our current provider is Midwest Public Risk. The renewal amount for the 2019-2020 term came to $222,640.72, which is a 2% increase from last year, which equates to a $4,362.52 increase. So we are requesting or recommending that City Council approve this property and liability insurance renewal.
Questions, comments, or concerns from council? Mr. Dykeman?
The increase, is that due to losses or just a?
Well, as
general
it's
increase?
as it's a pool, generally you see an increase as other entities have claims. It's actually not as big of an increase as last year, so it's a lot less of an increase this year from last year if you look at the comparison.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, seeing nothing, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Ms. Payne. On to resolution number 19-R-21, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, awarding the bid for the re-roof of the Republic Police Department facility. Need a motion and a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Mr. Keeling and Mr. Hawkins are here tonight.
Good evening. If it seems like we've been here before addressing this issue, it's because we have. Once again, Wayne is here to address any technical issues. But as Mr. Cameron addressed during his administrator report last meeting, we originally awarded this project to Roof One LLC on 5/7. As we began contract negotiations, there become an issue on their end with our insurance requirements. They asked to withdraw. We honored that withdrawal. We contacted the next low bidder, which is A1 Guaranteed Roofing, asked if they would still be interested in the work at the bid price. They indicated they were. So it is our recommendation here tonight to go with the next low bidder in the amount of $61,685. We still are coming in our budget. We budgeted $65,000 for this project. There were one request, and we want to honor that request as well, is for an extended deadline. There's a month delay in just this process, and plus it's been a really heavy storm season, as you might imagine. So the contract has been reworded with a new deadline of, I'll get there, September 13th.
Okay. Mr. Hawkins, is it very identical or very similar material as what was going to be used by?
Yes, it'll be the same materials exactly.
So everything
We,
is covered?
yes, we specified the landmark certainty shingles, so
Okay.
they'll be the same items.
Okay. Do you have something, Mr. Russell?
I do. Does A1 know of the issues that Roof One LLC had? And are we going to encounter the same thing with A1 when they get into the contract? And
After this happened, Jared and I had a conversation about how can we prevent this from happening again.
Okay.
Typically, on a job this size, with all the requirements that are in the bid specs, I mean, you really need to be reading the bid specs because there's bonds and things in there. So it's really amazing to me that they did not, deal with this up front. But in order to correct that in the future, before we go to a notice of award, I'm going to be asking to see some insurance certificates ahead of time. But as far as whether they knew or not, I believe it was mentioned to them that they declined because of deciding not to meet the insurance requirements.
That's correct.
Any other questions or comments or concerns? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Resolution number 19-R-22, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing task order number 8 with Burns and McDonald to develop a stormwater design manual. Need a motion and a second.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second, Mr. Britt.
Good evening. Sorry about that. During task order 6, which is part of our comprehensive plan, Burns McDonald reviewed our ordinances and specifications in relation to stormwater, specifically section 410.650 through 710. And they came up with some suggestions for us, and one of those suggestions was the creation of a standalone stormwater design manual, and that's what task order 8 will be. So what they're going to do is they're going to start with the existing ordinance. They're going to take that, reformat it into a manual. They're going to submit that to us. We're going to work with them to kind of create new best management practices. They're going to advise us on what they believe are the best ways to proceed with stuff. And then we're going to move on from there. There will be a preliminary draft with those suggestions that they made, and then we'll sit down, talk with them, decide what's in the best interest of the city, and then they will eventually submit a final draft of this project, or of this manual. The cost of this will be approximately $55,800, which has already been budgeted as of the last budget amendment, and time for completion will be about 12 months.
Questions, comments, or concerns? Council.
Mr. Mayor. So I want to elaborate on what this process will also help us do from a regulatory perspective, is that currently drainage per se is done through ordinance. By moving this to a manual, it'll allow the flexibility of staff to use more of the creative design work versus a very difficult, anything that we want to change coming to council and modifying that when they see there needs to be a correction. That will actually go into a manual versus into policies. There will be a lot of work that we do in the ordinance that will actually make this a little bit more user-friendly and developer-friendly, but also staff-friendly. If they find something that basically don't fit in a square box, they can work with the developer and make amendments or changes to that manual as necessary versus it being a code issue that setting that policy or those directions for staff is a little bit more difficult for development communities to navigate around and for staff to make those decisions so allow it. So I like the direction that the staff is taking this.
Got a lot of static in the speaker. I have no idea why. All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns from council? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Okay, we'll move on to reports from staff. Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real quickly, I want to update from the meeting last 2 weeks ago. Garrett and his staff presented the ICC code about what the changes are going to be. Shortly thereafter, I received a phone call completely opposite of what we communicated in the meeting, suggesting that we were going to be implementing the energy code as part of our process. And so I just want to make it very clear what Garrett said again in that meeting was that we are going to be adopting the ICC codes, but we'll be presenting them It includes an energy code, of which we're not going to be enforcing, so, we'll continue to work on getting that out, but it was less than 24 hours and there was already a misrepresentation of what we were doing. So basically, I just want to be clear for the community what it is not, for the development community what it's not. And I do believe we have another meeting with the HBA coming up in July, basically, because I'm asking for their endorsement prior to it coming to the council for review. But I wanted to clarify that tonight, just so there's no confusion. Next week is Republic Night at the Springfield Cardinals game. That's June 13th. If you've not bought your tickets or signed up, please see Lisa tonight. Maybe we can, I think they're $11 a piece. I believe today, I saw at the chamber meeting today, I believe last year Republic's involvement was right around 300 of our patrons in the community. In fact, I didn't even know it was taking place. The mayor contacted me. He's like, hey, did you even know this was an event? And we're like, not really. And so this year we made a concerted effort, put some information out to the community. Mike's done a fantastic job. I know the school district's done a fantastic job. The Springfield Cardinals have done a very good job of getting the message out. I believe we're around 500 people that have signed up or engaged for that event. So looking forward to having a great showing. I know we're going to be honoring some teachers that are part of the school district's going to be doing. So I know the mayor's trying to find somebody to throw out the first pitch. But look forward to seeing everybody to show up to that event. And just for information, I'll be out of the office for the next meeting. So Jared's going to be sitting here taking care of business. So, and here's what's interesting, it's a large agenda item coming up, so have fun with that. And, but that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Great, large agenda. That's a lot
Large development agenda.
there. Okay, so the only thing I really have is that in the past, we've gone around the table, you know, and asked each council member what they had for the good of the order, basically. And I think sometimes that puts us in a position to say things maybe we shouldn't say outside of an agenda item or outside of an executive session. And furthermore, I think it kind of forces us to try to talk when we may not have anything to say. So what we'll do from here on is, and I'll open this up for discussion if there is any, what I'd like to do, plan on doing, is just closing the meetings out by asking if there's anything else. If there's not, we'll move to adjournment. So anybody have any thoughts, inside or? Mr. Rupp.
I really like the sound of my own voice, don't get me wrong, but I happen to agree with your assessment. There's no need to make meetings longer, especially in the evening, so I think it's a good move. If we have something to say, I'm sure you open it up and want to say it.
Right.
We don't need to talk just to hear our own voices.
Right. Sounds good.
Also, I think it's a good move. Sometimes we may have a complaint from a citizen that we may bring out, and maybe that citizen's name, or the citizen rather, would not want their name mentioned, you know, over the telephone. So I think it's definitely a good move.
Okay. Okay, with that, does anybody have anything else? We will not move to adjournment. I will ask for a motion and a second. Go into executive session. No further action other than announcing adjournment by the mayor shall take place after an executive session that is scheduled as the last matter on the agenda unless otherwise stated on the agenda or as allowed per RSMO 610.02. Tonight we'll be covering RSMO 610.021.3, hiring, firing, promotion, or disciplining personnel. Closed session, closed vote, closed record. Need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Dykeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin?
Aye.
Councilmember Bashir?
Aye.
Councilmember Poole? Aye. Councilmember Self?
Aye.
Motion carries 8-0. We will take a 5-minute recess at 7 p.m. We will re-adjourn for executive session. I hit that one today.
Man,
Sorry.
that one was there.